morning. I hope you can hear me beyond the buzz of the traffic. I'm at Eastside United Methodist Church, and I am here to be the celebrant for communion this morning. Today's video will be about love and work, the work of love, which means that we look at our values as the grounding basis for our ethics and our critical thinking skills. I was happy to be at Eastside last Sunday because I got to witness the incredible work over the last 10 years that Tim and Elizabeth have done to build real community in this particular congregation. One time my office in Decatur was broken into. I'll never forget this. I felt the intrusion of the person who broke in had defiled my workspace there. This intruder broke up that peace in that space for me in my mind. Elizabeth immediately responded. She decided to load up her 2 little babies, and she brought me a candle. She wanted me to burn that candle and clear and clean the air. And it really helped. It restored a sort of innocence, cleared the air, and created more peace for me in that space. And it was so touching to me that she acted out of such kindness and consideration. And even her little babies restored innocence in a space in a beautiful way. Such acts of kindness like this far outweigh intended harm. And I've watched Tim and Elizabeth do this over the years at Eastside. Tim pastored the church, blending the beauty of the arts into a storefront space at first, and then led the congregation of people into this space that they're now occupying, renovating an older church building and helping people to come and belong. I will never forget showing up in the old storefront space, though, wearing a hoodie one day. I decided to follow the lead of many African American pastors whom I have respected over the years, when they called for people to put on a hoodie after Trayvon Martin was shot and killed. I remember wearing that hoodie sitting in my seat in church. I was the only one wearing one that day, and it felt awkward at first because people started noticing me. But then I sunk back into the feel of that hoodie around my head, and I tapped into a sort of rage that someone's baby, someone's child who was born on the exact same day as my own child, some other mother's child, had been shot dead for no real reason, other than that he was black, wearing a hoodie, holding Skittles, and had gotten someone's fear and rage activated by no fault of his own, projected upon as if he was some man's enemy. Howard Thurman, Tim knows this because he led Eastside in a deeper dive of Howard Thurman. Howard Thurman's voice speaks a much-needed word of wisdom about how we can all become more human. So I want to ask, who is my enemy? Who is your enemy? How can you and I do the work to love our perceived enemies? We are living through a mental and spiritual health crisis, just as COVID physically separated us from our closest contacts, where we had to sit in isolation. Many of us reckoning with how it is we know what we know and consider what it is we really do not know. We were forced to witness our most violent experiences as a nation. Those horrors got stirred, particularly by rhetoric intent to further divide us over which camp we could belong to, over one issue or another. We used to be able to rally around and discuss, but emotional reactions fed narrative divides, aligning with fake talking points that appealed more to how to discern who is in and who is out, thusly projecting onto others as if they are my enemy and your enemy. The woke mob versus the religious right, the snowflakes versus the white nationalists, defend the police versus stand your ground, critical race theory versus replacement theory. Pro-life aligns with pro-Second Amendment rights. Public health policy aligns with pro-choice. It gets confusing And our reentry into to society now is met with cries about mental health versus mental illness and children being shot on their last day of school. Who is my enemy? Who is your enemy? What work is mine to do? What is your work? What story can we tell one another to find common ground while we figure this out, tapping into a higher power? I started listening to Howard Thurman after January 6th for 7 months because I lost my capacity to hear the human voice coming through all the news networks. But listening to Howard Thurman became a balm for my soul. I encourage you to look up for yourself the audio files or even this curated collection on Audible. But what I want to deliver is some of the same insights for our own time through this storytelling platform, where we hopefully, eventually, as I continue to build this out, create little communities to consider that there's always more to the story. Now I've been at this for a really long time, doing my work. A year after this home footage, my mom sent me and my sister to Mississippi. I spent a month following around a woman, a black woman, to and from her home and to the hospital and all over the town of Greenwood, Mississippi. She would say, "Melissa, I am not your babysitter. I am your friend." But the truth was, we were in a difficult time as a nation. I was with her during the month of April 1968. So I watched Dr. King's funeral with her on April 9th, 1968. Just she and I. So when Dr. King's voice was booming during his funeral as they played a sermon called Drum Major Instinct, little Bernice looked up at her mom. And Miss Rosie said, "Do you see that little girl right there? She is just like you." Something I appreciate about Howard Thurman is that he uses story to tap into the parts of our human minds, triggering mirror neurons. But I'm going to say more about that in the next video about playing. So I'm going to use 2 stories he tells from 2 different sermons in order to help us consider what is at stake when we come up against what we hold as personal core values and then decide, well, how is this confrontation where I must defend my core values suddenly, how is my own posturing participating in creating my enemy? In Quest of the Human Spirit, look it up, Part 7, Thurman lays out for us a real dilemma, quoting Job, "Till I die, I will not put away mine integrity from me." Then he says the point of work, which harnesses and channels anxiety, is I want to find some radical test for my life. This is the clue, my clue to my own integrity. If I can do this, if I can stand up and cast my vote and not be dogged by any minority opinion within me. So listen now to Howard Thurman's own voice as he tells a story about a 69-year-old woman calling him up on the phone to tell him about her work that she started 10 years earlier.
I'm reading from my book, Meditations of the Heart. The telephone rang at 7:15 in the morning, and on the other end was a lady whose voice seemed full of years, soft but strong. What she had to say was profoundly stirring. "I'm sorry to disturb you so early in the morning, but I wanted to call you before you left the hotel for the day. About 10 years ago, I'm now 69, I decided to examine my life to see what, if anything, I could do to put into practice my own convictions about brotherhood. Why I decided this, and not suddenly, I need not say, but I did. The first thing I discovered was that I knew almost nothing about other races in my own city, particularly about Negroes. I went to the library and was given a small list of books and magazines. I began to work. The things I learned, when it seemed to me that I had my hands on enough facts, and I discovered you don't need too many facts because they get in your way, I plotted a course of action. Then I was stumped. What could I do? A 69-year-old lady. I had no particular abilities, very little energy, and an extremely modest income. But I did like to talk with people as I met them on the buses and in the stores. I decided that I would spread the facts that I had and my own concern among all the people whose lives were touched by mine in direct conversation. It took me some time to develop a simple approach that would not be an intrusion or a discourtesy, but my years helped me. For several years, I had been doing this on the bus, riding into town each week, in a department store where I've made my purchases for 2 decades, and in various other places. Occasionally, I run into a person in the street who stops to introduce himself and to remind me of a previous meeting. One such person said, "I guess you've forgotten me, but about 4 years ago, I sat by you on a bus. And I don't know how the question came up, but we talked about the Negroes. And you started me thinking along lines that had never occurred to me. You even gave me the name of a book which I noted and purchased. Since then, I have been instrumental in changing the whole personnel practice of our business on this question, and thanks to you." Continuing, she said, "I know that this is not very much, and I guess many people are doing much more, but I thought I would tell you this so that in your moments of discouragement, you may remember what one simple old lady was doing to help in little ways to right big wrongs. Goodbye, and God bless you." She did not give me her name nor her address. She merely shared her testimony and gave her witness. The idea that because I am weak or I am of limited resources, either intellectual or even emotional or financial, or because I am not strategically placed so that my word can carry the big weight, because none of these things that I have described may not apply to me, I may decide that therefore there isn't anything that I can do to express my confirmation of my membership in the human race and all men's membership in the human race. It may be that I am unable to do as this lady did, but always within every human being's reach, there is something that he or she can do and a position against the things against which you stand. Your membership in the human race is an active membership.
Today's topic is about work, the work of loving on the personal level. And I simply want to have us stop for a minute, those of you who are watching, and think about our values. It's my working assumption that what comes to head during conflict is competing values, value systems, and projections that come out of some of those values when they get challenged or when we perceive they're being challenged. When we really may have more in common than what it is that is getting preyed upon to create the divides. We're in a war of rhetoric right now, and so the work ahead is to do critical thinking. And I want us to start with values. So turn this video off just for a minute, and if you would, please jot down your 5 core values that come to mind. There's no right or wrong answer. Just take a minute, and you can even message me and tell me yourself in an email what your 5 core values are. One of my core values is about authenticity, having some integrity around being authentically me, thinking my own thoughts, doing my own work. So when I feel like someone is being disingenuous, it's going to trigger my core value of authenticity. I'm going to be suspect, and I'm going to activate some assessment of what is true, what is false, based on that core value. You may have other core values. So look at your list, circle one, and finish this thought. Once, when my core value was challenged in this way, I believed this person was my enemy. Oftentimes we think that our enemies are the ones who don't share our values. Our enemies are the ones that we attack to defend our values. So what does it mean when we begin to see others as our enemies without having that conversation about what it is that's at stake and what the differences between us might be about? There's a lot of rhetoric floating around about who our enemies should be. You know, there's a lot of splitting and dividing among groups of people who make assumptions about who they're sharing values with, and also people that they see or perceive as their enemies. And without having conversations, there are a lot of buzzwords and terms floating around and slogans. It's time for us to do some critical thinking. So the work of love is real work to do. Howard Thurman tells a story about a man who sowed his enemy's field. A man and his wife had become an enemy of the community because they had a dog who had killed a neighbor's child. So the community decided to give them no grain so they would starve. But the hero of the story couldn't sleep, anguished about thinking his neighbor would starve. So he got up in the middle of the night, took some grain, climbed the fence, and sowed his neighbor's field. His wife asked him, "Why did you sow your enemy's field with grain?" He said, "I am planting my enemy's field with grain so that between me and him, God might exist." Let me say it again. I am planting my enemy's field with grain so that between me and my enemy, God might exist. Last video was about Howard Thurman saying that love, the definition of love, the working definition, is to deal with and be dealt with another beyond all good and beyond all evil. And in so doing, we overcome isolation. A lot of the rhetoric has stirred up a perceived difference in values. And if we don't know how to name our values and have conversations about those values, and fear takes hold of each and every one of us, and we're going to all starve. We're going to all starve. So we have to do the work. We have to do the work of love and dealing with one another in authentic ways.